My dialogue friends, this year we are going to do the dialogue virtually. It is one of those years. It has been very difficult for a lot of us. Since last time we met in Jerusalem, the world is a different place. So, of course, meeting virtually isn't the same. We like the face-to-face interaction because the platform of the dialogue enables interaction and understanding between leaders, and that enables friendships that develop over times. You can only do this face-to-face. So the virtual dialogue is a stopgap. However, it's an important one. It's important because we all come with similar issues, especially this year. And those issues get us together. And together we are going to be able to redefine problems and hopefully find new solutions. And by doing so, we contribute to the world of ideas. We do so respectfully, no matter what our backgrounds or political affiliations. This is the main feature of the dialogue. We listen to each other. I would like to thank our partner, the Institute for Counterterrorism in Herzliya. In particular, I'd like to thank Professor Boaz Ganor, his assistant Stevie Weinberg, our team in Israel, Matty Gill and Ayelet Frisch, our team in Australia, Alan Howe and Christopher Pine, thank you both, and our team in London, that's James Gerd from CFI and Michael Rubin from LFI. So now we are going to present you with the anthems as we do every year when we are in Jerusalem. I will invite you to be upstanding as we usually do. It's up to you if you do that, of course, but I do recommend it. And following this, we're going to have a series of speeches. The very first one is the welcome of the Prime Minister of Australia, Mr. Scott Morrison, and I want to thank him. The other speakers are from Australia, the Attorney General, Mr. Christian Porter, the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Richard Marles, and from Israel, we have Gideon Saar, followed by Mr. Isaac Buji Herzog. From London, from the UK, we have Lord Pickles, followed by Steve McCabe. I want to thank all of our speakers. After that, we do have some entertainment for you. There can't be a dialogue without a little bit of culture. That's what I do anytime I'm involved, whether it's business or whatever it is, there has to be an element of culture. So please don't switch off until the very end, make sure. And then it will be time to start our debates. So have a wonderful dialogue.
G'day everyone, it's great to join you, even if it is virtually. I know this dialogue is usually held in Jerusalem. I remember visiting the city many years ago, and like so many, I was overwhelmed. I felt a deep sense of connection to this city of history and, importantly for me, of faith. And remarkably, modern innovation as well. Innovation occurs through the sharing of ideas, and that is what this dialogue fosters on so many levels. Israel is a nation of great ingenuity and innovation. It has to be. And the exchange of ideas that this dialogue fosters is all the more special for us. I also feel a deep affinity with the United Kingdom also. My ancestors came out of the United Kingdom more than 2 centuries ago. As they came out here, I have to confess, they didn't come of their own accord. It was a compulsory transit, but that is part of the story of those times, and is indeed part of my story, as my ancestors came here literally in chains. I've visited that wonderful citadel of democracy many times, and I'm always impressed by the British people's strong sense of identity, which they combine with a truly global outlook and a deep confidence in the future, and their broader responsibility for the welfare of our wider world. That is the greatness of Britain. Of course, this is a difficult year for all of our nations, as it is around the world, and COVID-19 is the most severe health and economic crisis that the world has faced in a century. The health impacts, they're heartbreaking, and I know particularly there in the United Kingdom. The economic consequences, absolutely devastating, but we're making our way back. The ramifications, though, we know will be felt for many years to come. But this global tragedy has also reminded us of what connects us most deeply: our human vulnerability, our interdependence, and what I called at the United Nations, our common hope. A common hope to see and build a better world, even when our current circumstances appear bleak. A common hope that allows us to tackle challenges, whether it be pandemics, climate change, the preservation of peace and security, and to do so together and with confidence. And today and in the future, it's critical that like-minded liberal democracies work together in a common cause, because in our view, that common hope is best served by the common values that as like-mindeds we share. Our collective efforts can make a big difference, and the United Kingdom and Israel are crucial partners for Australia. We're working together to fight the COVID-19 global pandemic and recession, to develop a vaccine, and to drive that all-important business-led recovery. We're partnering to develop practical, scalable, and commercially viable technologies to reduce global emissions as we practically confront the challenge of climate change. And together, we're striving to uphold the liberal worldview of openness, of economic and civil and political freedoms, which has underpinned global peace and stability since the end of the Second World War. And there are threats to these, which we all understand, and we must stand fast. The friendship between our nations transcends partisan politics. Above all, it's nourished by our shared values, an enduring belief in democracy and the rule of law, a commitment to the rules-based norms and standards of our international community in spirit, not just letter, and a deep conviction that humanity flourishes where there's a diversity of opinion, where there's transparency, which this dialogue does much to foster. So I wish you well with your discussions, and though I know Passover is still a few months away, may we say with confidence and in hope for the future, next year in Jerusalem we can gather.
Last year I was delighted to take part in the Leadership Dialogue in Israel and saw firsthand how such an initiative can promote a diversity of views on a global scale. Participants came from the United Kingdom, Israel, Australia and the United States, and included former Prime Ministers, senior cabinet members, economists, leading business figures, diplomats, editors and key members of the intelligence community. It was an incredibly unique gathering. It is a very important initiative and a tool at the disposal of policymakers that is important, and I encourage others to jump on board this year's dialogue. I'm very pleased that the dialogue continues, albeit under the changes due to COVID-19. And this year's virtual dialogue will still connect us all as we exchange ideas honestly and with open minds. Although I would say that this is a poor substitute for Israel beaming in from Parliament House in Canberra. While we might come to these sessions with preconceived ideas, it is great to see everyone is prepared to listen. That listening is the key, to hear others' ideas and perhaps formulate a few of our own. At a time when we face as many challenges as we share our values, such clear thinking with an open mind might just help us imagine a better, fairer, safer world for all of our countries that we represent by participating. So on behalf of the Australian Government, I'd like to congratulate all of the participants, and I wish you all a great dialogue and hope very much that in another year's time we'll be meeting again in person.
I'd like to welcome everyone to the 2020 Leadership Dialogue. This has been a year unlike any other, and it's changed our lives in so many different ways. But one way it's changed our lives particularly is that we're not all meeting in person at the King David Hotel in order to have this dialogue. There is something magical about meeting at the end of the year in the Eternal City with all of you to have such an enlightening conversation to finish the year. And it's like so many other things in 2020, doing it this way doesn't feel quite the same. But having said that, the challenges that arise as a result of the coronavirus crisis make this as important a dialogue between thought leaders in Australia, the UK and Israel as any that we have ever had. So I want to give an acknowledgement that I wouldn't be doing if we were meeting at the King David. I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people, the traditional owners of the land on which I'm recording this message in Sydney, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. This is an acknowledgement that we do as a matter of honour and respect to our traditional people, the Indigenous Australians, who are the oldest continuing culture in the world. I would also like to acknowledge Albert de Dom. This dialogue is an expression of his passion for the relationship between Australia and Israel and the United Kingdom, but also his view of how important it is that thought leaders in these great democracies come together to talk about the challenges which are facing our countries today. Before the coronavirus struck, Australia was experiencing the most complex strategic landscape that we've had since the end of the Second World War. A rising and assertive China, America, who had withdrawn from the Trans-Pacific Partnership. There was a lot which made our circumstances far from obvious. But with the coronavirus and how that's played out in China and in the United States, also here in Australia, but also, of course, how it's played out in Israel and the United Kingdom, mean that all of those challenges are even more acute. We have an incoming American administration, which is going to change our strategic circumstances, as it inevitably will those of both Israel and the United Kingdom. And how we deal with the health recovery from coronavirus, how we deal with the rollout of a vaccine, how we deal with the global economic recovery, all of these potentially stand as the defining issues of our age. So there is much to talk about. And while it'd be better to be doing it in person, I'm really looking forward to this virtual dialogue. And I want to thank Albert again. The challenges involved in making this year's dialogue happen have been particularly significant. And this dialogue will be as important as any we've had. I really hope that a year from now, in a very different world, we are able to meet again in person at the King David. But I really want to wish you all the very best over the coming few days for what stands to be a fantastic and exciting and illuminating dialogue. Thank you.
Dear friends in Israel, in Australia, in the UK, and all over the world, it is hard to believe we are now in the 12th year of the Leadership Dialogue Conference, and I want to congratulate my dear friend Albert Dadon for his leadership in this important event. I have had the privilege to participate in nearly all of the conferences, and I am pleased that we have not let Corona stop this year's, if we cannot be together in person in Jerusalem. But as we say, next year in Jerusalem. We have seen something very strange happen in Israel over the last few months. We have all felt more isolated than ever. We could not be together over the Chagim, over the Jewish festivals. We could not mark Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day, or Yom HaAtzmaut, Independence Day. I know that in the UK you have seen similar cycles of lockdowns and restrictions. And I have to say, we must congratulate our colleagues in Australia, which have had much more success, and I think we can learn from their experience. But at the same time, as we have felt more isolated, Israel has found itself with new friends in the region. These friendships may have come as a surprise, but they should not surprise anyone. We have shared interests and shared threats with Bahrain and the UAE and others in our region. We share the same environment and we know we can do things together. But we also have the same threat, the threat of Iran, and all they are doing to destabilize the region and to promote extremism and terrorism. So the Abraham Accords send a message to the world that the Middle East is seeing a new dawn. They sent a message to Iran, but the new agreements also send a message to the Palestinians. We will not wait. We will continue to promote peace and stability and cooperation in our region. We hope that one day they will join. But you know, I think that the Abraham Accords also have a message for Israel too. We have established our place in the region and we have built new bridges across the Gulf. But we cannot think for a second that we no longer need to stand firm for our rights in our land. We must work to help these new relationships also understand the Jewish people's history in the land of Israel. We must explain our position well. During this coronavirus crisis, we have learned modesty. Let us learn from the experience of the others and cooperate to overcome mutual challenges.
Dear friends, participants of this year's Leadership Dialogue of Israel, United Kingdom, and of course, most importantly, Australia, because the Australians were at the pillar of the creation of this wonderful, wonderful trilateral dialogue. And I want to first and foremost to congratulate my good, dear friend, Albert Dadon, who's now celebrating 12 years for this wonderful dialogue, meaning next year they'll have a bar mitzvah for the dialogue. And I hope that the bar mitzvah next year will be B'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, meaning next year in Jerusalem. Right now, we're all contained to our homes and to our offices due to the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. And yet, modern technology enables us to focus on the big issues of the day. And there are many, many important and big issues of the day between our nations, between our political systems, between Jewish communities in our respective countries, and most importantly, as we face the world with a common denominators of values and perception on life. The region is changing in front of our eyes, and we see the Abraham Accords and their outcome as an amazing development, which we should welcome wholeheartedly. Nonetheless, the region is also faced still with the vile approach of Iran to the region, to Israel, to its existence, putting some of the Palestinian question as a tool to try to influence the region, whilst I still believe adamantly that there are ways and means to reach new solutions in the region, including with our neighbors. Syria and Lebanon are a hub of terror, which we are faced with and are not relaxed about. And nonetheless, the emerging coalition, which was underneath, now emerging above board, with all the moderate Sunni Arab states around us, is an amazing development which invites not only political cooperation, but huge economic cooperation for Britain, for Australia. The relationship between Israel and Australia and Israel and the United Kingdom has never been as good. It's an amazing, amazing development in our lives. As we read more and more what happened here 100 years ago, when both the Australian Army and the British Army were involved in the first steps of recreation of the national home of the Jewish people. So I want to wish all of you great health, good health, great success in all your endeavors. Let's hope that 2021 will bring with it good news for all of us. And let's hope we can meet. And we trust you, our dear friend Albert, that you'll make this happen. Toda rabah and good luck to all of you.
Well, hello. Not even COVID-19 or the prevention of international flights could prevent Albert getting us all together. Obviously sorry that we're not meeting in the bar of the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, particularly as it's against a time of great optimism in the Middle East with the signing of the Abraham Accords, and across the enormous growth in the number of nations that have signed up to the IRA definition of anti-Semitism, including for the first time a number of Arab and Muslim countries. We've seen, of course, that Australia has become a full member of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, and that deal was essentially brokered at a side meeting of the dialogue 3 years ago. So we're obviously pleased to be all back together, particularly as it brings together parliamentarians and opinion formers from all political parties right across our great nations, having forged lasting ties and relationships that have driven us all forward. We've got a distinguished panel of speakers, including lots of my favourites, a former Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, a former Defence Minister, Liam Fox, and Christopher Pine, and a host of distinguished ambassadors, including my old friend Mark Regev. Now, we're joined by a leading group of Conservative colleagues, Lord Pollock, Stuart, to the rest of us. We have Stephen Crabb, and we've got Andrew Percy making their appearance at the dialogue, along with obviously with Liam, and I think we've also got our Select Committee Chair, Tobias Elwood. A series of important and timely discussions, including Iran, China, and COVID-19. Despite the pandemic, delighted to say that Conservative Friends of Israel have continued to work with Conservative parliamentarians to ensure that Israel's case is heard loud and clear in Parliament. Our parliamentary friends have kept Israel on the agenda, and throughout the year, we've almost 400 separate contributions in Parliament in support of Israel by Conservative. I think that's probably a record, and it's something that we can be very proud of. In October, over 80 Conservative parliamentarians wrote to the Prime Minister to express concerns over the expiration of the UN arms embargo and encourage the UK government to take a firmer stance against Iran's support for international terrorism. Just a couple of days ago, CFI Vice Chairman and Dialogue veteran Andrew Percy unearthed vile anti-Semitic material being shared by Amazon's Alexa smart speaker The story received worldwide attention, and thanks to this work, Amazon has now looked at ways in which to ensure that Alexa is not going to be the voice of anti-Semitism and anti-Israeli feelings. So, my dear friends, I'm very much looking forward to this dialogue. And
sorry, I don't know that one.
Alexa is always listening, isn't it? But let us say this. Let's use the old phrase, next year in Jerusalem.
I'm delighted to be taking part in my first International Institute for Strategic Leadership Dialogue. I want to thank Albert and his team for putting the conference together in such difficult circumstances. I'm also delighted to be joining for the first time as the chair of Labour Friends of Israel, following in the footsteps of my good friends and immediate predecessors, Joan Ryan and Louise Ellman, who I know are long-standing and valued participants at this event. When they addressed you last year, the Labour Party in the UK had just suffered a huge electoral defeat. A defeat in part caused by the anti-Semitism scandal which has scarred our party and caused such hurt and distress to our Jewish members and the wider Jewish community. With the election of Keir Starmer and the publication of the Equality and Human Rights Commission report, we've begun to take the steps to root out the scourge of anti-Semitism. I agree with Keir that our goal is simple. We never again want to see the words Labour and anti-Semitism in the same sentence. I've made clear since taking over as chair of LFI our determination to support the leadership on this. I also welcome Keir's support for a more balanced and constructive debate on the Middle East. We've got to end the anti-Zionism which lies at the heart of so much anti-Jewish racism on the left. We must end the obsession with Israel which has characterised far too much of Labour's foreign policy debate in recent times. We need to re-establish our credentials as an honest broker as far as Israel and Palestine are concerned. We need to broaden and deepen our relationship with Israel and focus on the economic and cultural opportunities that lie ahead. And of course, we need to recognise the potential offered by the Abraham Accords, and we must work to build peace and security. It's great to be with you today. I hope we have really productive discussions over the next few days, and with all my heart, I hope we can pursue these matters in person next year in Jerusalem. Thank you.
And now I would like to introduce you to one of the greatest voices of Israel. That's the voice of David Daor. David sent me this live rendition of TUSHMOR EL HAOLAM YELED. That's going to be a treat. Enjoy.
כל אחת ואחד כאן הערב שבליבם פנימה חי הילד הקטן שהיה פעם, תשמרו על העולם שלנו, כי נדמה שאנחנו כבר לא מצליחים לעשות את זה לאחרונה. יש דברים שאסור לראות. תשמור על העולם ילד, אם תראה תפסיק להיות גיבור של העולם ילד, עם חיוך של מלאכים. תשמור על העולם ילד, כי אנחנו כבר לא מצליחים. בוא תשמע איתכם, תשמור על העולם, תשמור על העולם, אל תגזים במחשבות, כי כמה שתדע יותר יהיה, אתה רק תבין פחות. ובשעה מסוימת נסגרות כל הדלתות, וכל האהבה נגמרה, רק אתה ממשיך לטבוע. יש דברים שאסור לראות. תשמור על העולם ילד, אם תראה תפסיק להיות גיבור של העולם ילד, עם חיוך של מלאכים. תשמור על העולם ילד, כי אנחנו כבר לא מצליחים. איתכם, גיבור של העולם, גיבור של העולם ילד. כי אנחנו כבר לא מצליחים. תשמרו על העולם שלנו, בעזרת השם ובעזרתכם אנחנו כן נצליח.
תודה רבה רבה.